Sherry, welcome back to Family Talk. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here.
As we get started, we're going to talk about a pretty tough subject today. It's not easy. As a matter of fact, some people listening, this is really going to cut to the core for them. But sexual betrayal is, it's a tough road. Whether it's having someone you love be unfaithful to you with another person, or, with the whole pornography issue, Sherry, it's changed the game.
It is a ton. And I say there's no condom for the internet. So, whether it's another person or in my case, people, right? In my case, it was pornography, it was prostitutes, and it was multiple affairs. So where do you stop and start counting? It at some point, it just annihilates that person. I mean, Connor, in the very act of doing that, was annihilating himself.
Yeah.
Through that whole compulsive sexual acting out. And then I was annihilated on the other side of that. And the ancient Hebrew word, get this, for lust is ava. And what it means is the strong nail that binds you to itself.
Wow.
In contrast to the ancient Hebrew word for hope, which is a derivative of it, which is kaveh, which means what comes after the nail. So that lust binds us to itself, and it is a weapon of mass destruction aimed right at our families today and relationships, and it's eroding the fabric of our families.
Frank Pittman was a researcher on this very issue years ago. He's passed on now, but not Christian. But he said that probably more than 50% of couples who go through this, which he believed was the most difficult journey, the most difficult road in marriage, if it happens, to walk. He said they actually put their marriages back together again. And he gave a hope-filled message. And I want to start there. But Sherry, let me say this too. We also know that there are just some who can't get through it. Maybe the words of Jesus are very appropriate here. Don't give yourself to a bill of divorcement, except it be for porneia, sexual infidelity. And in this thing, what he was doing is he was teaching us a lesson here. And I think it's that kind of brokenness between a trust with couples is really sacred and difficult to work through.
It is. And thank you for mentioning the word porneia, because in my journey with Connor, I had actually gotten counsel around that, because porn is devastating. And Chuck Swindoll wrote the book Strike the Original Match. And in there, he talks about that, mentions just what you said, and then he goes in to say this. He says, it represents a lifestyle of sexual sin. Someone that is unrepentant is not turning around. And compulsive sexual acting out and addictive sexual acting out hooks people to it. And they oftentimes don't know how to stop it themselves.
Hey, let's talk about you. Let's go back in this story for a moment. What'd you do? You find out, hey, we got a nightmare going. This is awful.
It is awful.
I mean, you want to throw up? I mean, I'm just, what was the moment like?
Well, the first time I ever found out Connor was doing something in this world was when we were dating. And I go back to that moment all the time because he made a 900 number call, and that was a sex line in that day. Today we've got cyber sexy internet. It's so much easier to get than even back then.
I know.
But I was shocked. I felt kind of icky about it. I felt gross. I was like, what is this? But I was so naive. I didn't understand what it was. And so I asked his brother. We went to the same college campus. We were at Bible college. And I said, so what is this? And his brother said, you know what, Sherry? Probably every guy on this campus has made a phone call to the 900 number at some time or another. So I discounted it. I minimized it. I didn't probe. I didn't ask more. And it was like cancer that had already been a part of his life. But because I chose that day, I said, I'm not perfect. I felt like I needed to forgive him. And then I moved forward. but my naivete, my inability to know what questions to even ask, my inability to dig deeper, I walked right into a marriage with a man who had been struggling since he was a young boy.
Yeah.
And many sexual brokenness, many of these people find it early on, right? They find that porn stash in their dad's garage. And kids today,
You just come across it on their cell phone, like you said.
These devices today,
Even randomly. It's unreal.
It's unreal.
And what they're getting exposed to, Sherry, is very different than like when I grew up. Seriously, what they're seeing, mighty men can't handle. You know that.
It's true. And then their brains, right? I mean, we've found this out in the last years that our brain gets really addicted to those dopamine, that feel-good drug. The adrenaline is the rush, and then oxytocin, which is the same chemical that is released when we are lovemaking or we're nursing babies.
Yeah. That
is a bonding chemical. And so you put three of those things together and they get bonded, hooked, and it becomes it's inside of them.
Yeah.
And so, taking me back to my story, the first time I think I was shocked, hurt, and devastated when I realized it was in our marriage. That is when I was scared out of my mind and I didn't know what to do. And it came to me, he said, I think I'm burnt out. And I'm like, burnt out? Because he was pulling away from me early on in our marriage. I was a newlywed. I waited to be sexual with him until we were married. And so I was excited about developing our sexual intimacy together. But when one day he was washing the dishes, we had just eaten, and I went up to nibble on his ear, and he pulled away. He was repulsed from my advance. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And then our whole sexual relationship had been very intermittent. We would go 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And I remember calling my best friend, Julie, and I said, hey, how is it after you and Kevin, are close intimately? And she said, oh, it's like kind of oil the next day. We're playful, we're fun, we connect better. And for me, it was disconnect. I was on the on the other end of someone who was pushing me away because he had such a fear of intimacy and of getting close. And
which is, by the way, very characteristic of people who are caught up in pornography and more.
Well, you know why? It's because the shame of acting out is on them, and they don't want you to smell it.
Right.
The shame does numbers on us.
Some people describe that as like sexual anorexia. I've seen. Mm-hmm. It's like because they are up on the internet so much, etc. You're right, struggle with intimacy.
Yep.
And so they avoid it. They don't do that piece, and he actually shuts down. And so one of the cardinal signs is there a real disengagement on that physical attraction and that sexual connectedness.
Totally. And where I think as counselors, we sometimes misstep with people, and it's actually called treatment trauma. I was being viewed as something was wrong with me. Like,
wow.
Why am I not being as available to Connor as I could have been? And I had clergy and counselors moving me in that direction. And when I said I'm available, I'm not withholding, there was kind of the raise of the eyebrow, or, maybe it's not what you should, not enough. Or I didn't know what to do. But the problem was he had been shut down for a very long time. And there was a secret and shame that he was living with. And so people couldn't get close to him. So
as a result, breaking free or breaking through this stuff and trying to keep yourself together is going to be a pretty tough road. Sherry, scrubbing that from the mind of a man is going to be a lot of work. You know that?
I do know that. And I'm sitting here going, scrubbing from a mind of a man, is it even possible? But I don't say that to not have hope. It's just there's no bleach for the brain. And so the longer, it's like having your brain in a crock pot of sexual acting out. It's hard to retrain your mind to these images. Okay. But the guys that I see that are going into good recovery and that are moving away from the porn and that are actually working in sobriety. They're taking that toxin and they're moving away from it, and they're beginning to reconnect because now they're safer in a way of learning how to connect and attach better and connect with their wives as real women. Actually, some of them end up saying, I've experienced stuff I never had before. But they got to get sober and safe before the partner can even be ready to re-engage with that.
So you can't do this marital work right there.
No,
We've got to get some individual stuff done here. We've got to clean the deck here for a little bit.
I love it.
By the way, we're talking about men and women.
Yes, we are.
Infidelity on both sides.
Yep.
And what does it look like? And how do you hold them accountable? I remember when I was a young therapist, I worked a couple of cases of infidelity, and in this thing, I believed that I could help this guy get through this stuff. But he still liked her, and he was still connected with her, and he was still talking with her, and he was still trying to hang out with her. And I thought, I can break him free of that. I tell you what, I learned real fast that if the spigot's not turned off, this isn't working. It doesn't matter how much you got, because you're right. There is a hijack of that brain, and there's an insanity really that kicks in. Wouldn't that be a good way of describing it?
It is.
It's something that's so hard to turn off, but somehow we've got to get in. And that accountability piece needs to be there, and we've got to demonstrate to each other. If we're going to take a step forward, we're going to clean this up in the name of love. I know that we're struggling together. I know that we're not connected emotionally. We're not close. I know we're not intimate, but let's take a step. I'm going to hold myself accountable. How significant is it to you? If you can't trust or be trustworthy, you're not going to go anywhere.
You can't. I can't bond with you if you are bonded to somebody else, right? And it's like having one foot in the marriage and one foot out. You can't be torn that way. There's two pillars that a betrayed partner need, whether you're male or female, and you've been betrayed. You need two things. The first one is safety. You've got to know that you are safe and that relationship is safe. So boundaries, right? Drawing the lines in the sand, saying it's not okay. Sometimes I've had couples even have to take a step back or out of that marriage. You need to live someplace else and be separated for a while if you're not willing to let go of that other woman. You've got to have a hard line. And then the truth. You've got to know the truth of what's happened. And there's something called a therapeutic full disclosure.
Hey.
It's very different than somebody just confessing some of what they want to tell you they've done. This is a well-planned, well-executed, well-trained process by people who know what they're doing in order to bring truth in the relationship so that the person that's been betraying can clean the deck, as you say. I love that. And then the betrayed partner can know what it is that they've done, what's happened right under their nose, so they can make choices about, do I want to continue forward with you? How do we know what we can heal from or what we can eventually someday forgive if I don't even know what you've done?
Absolutely. We've got some questions coming up from our listeners and people who are connected with us on social media. We're going to try to answer some of these questions in just a minute. But you're listening to Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk. I'm Dr. Tim Clinton, your host. Our special in-studio guest, Dr. Sherry Keffer. She is a therapist par excellence, and she's a lot of fun, a good friend of the ministry, and you're going to be continuing to see a lot of her through our broadcasts and more. She has a fascinating book out there called Intimate Deception that has done very, very well, healing the wounds of sexual betrayal. If you or someone you love is going through that in their relationship, I'm going to tell you what, this is becoming a standard book. Intimate Deception, Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal. Sherry, let's keep this thing going. I agree with you. We've got a mess, and it's difficult to take steps toward healing because trust is gone. And if you don't prove to me that you're not calling her, or you're not trying to sneak a text to him, etc. You hear what I'm saying?
I do.
We're not going to go anywhere. And it's tough because the wiring is all messed up in our brains. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And more. And in the midst of this, there's this piece where I just don't know if I like you, and then there's a struggle with, but I want us. I don't know where to turn. I don't know what to do. And I've sat down alone with many individuals, both male and female, who have been struggling on the receiving end of this. Like, he cheated, she cheated, and it's like, I don't know what to do. I mean, should I try to approach him? Should I try to love him or not? You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And Sherry, those are tough questions to ask and answer up front. Got any thoughts for our listeners?
You know, it's so interesting you say that, Tim, because I think one of the main questions people ask is, should I stay or should I go?
Yep.
And the first place I take them is, well, what have you done? And a lot of times, because people, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know where to go. We don't know how to get hooked into good recovery. We don't know how to find the therapists that have the get it factor, that can see it from across the room and not just some vanilla
homogenous.
homogeneous
Going on in this
There's
thing.
a ton.
And safety is a really paramount issue. And more than that, I mean, you have the potential for sexually transmitted diseases,
Yeah.
all kinds of things.
Well, I talk about that in my book. My kinsman redeemer husband, when I was writing this book, said, "You're going to talk about your STD?" I said, "Yes, I am." Because you know what? It's serious business. And I want the partners who've been betrayed to know that no one else can take care of their body. There was tremendous shame when I found out that I had an STD. I mean, do you think I wanted to go to our family doctor and talk about it? Do you think I wanted to go through all those tests? No. But nobody else could have walked through that door other than me. And I had to, because it means if I don't care for that, I'm going to end up with cervical cancer, right? And so I'll go first and I'll say, hey, I am so sorry that this has happened to you and you've just found out, but I want you to go get checked. I don't want the shame of what's happened to you bear out in something even more harmful to you. I want you to care for your body and get the help you need.
And just listening to you, I'm sitting there thinking, don't do this alone.
Yeah.
You can't. Yeah, don't do this alone.
And you know what? Many of us, most of us do. And let me tell you why.
Because of the shame.
Because of
secrecy.
Shame. And you know what I love about God? The biggest parable in the Bible is the woman at the well. And what was she dealing with? That's the longest. It's the most scripture, most words, most digits. And it's because she was a woman who was covered by shame that she didn't even want to go out until the heat of day. As a betrayed partner, I get that. Because that shame makes us want to pull away from others. It makes us, the ugliness of it, makes us want to go into the dark. And I feel like I am calling out to us, to partners, and I'm saying, come out from the dark. Come out into the light where you can get some help. Give y'all a call, right? Your show.
Find a safe place.
Find a safe
place. Get a therapist.
place.
Get somebody you can talk to.
Because
somebody
you can't do it alone, Tim.
Yeah.
Just like you said, there's too much, and there's too many moving parts. The person that's acting out needs to get into sobriety. Now, a lot of times people will get into recovery. They might start in a men's group or a women's group if they're betraying somebody, a love, sex, and relationship addict group, or maybe a sex addiction group, and so they're starting. But sometimes people get in there. It's a lot of hard work to have to go through and make amends, and have a sponsor and all that. And so some people just, I hate to say it, but they kick tires. They go and there's an illusion. Yeah. It's kind of the recovery's a con instead of the recovery is.
Sherry,
I understand.
They want to come in and say, hey, listen, I blew it. I'm sorry, honey. Will you forgive me? And
I call that?
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I call that?
I mean, I already told you I'm sorry. Okay?
You know what I call that?
Mm-mm.
A cheap sorry.
Oh.
That's a cheap sorry. Because if you have been impacted by the impact of betrayal, my research shows that we have symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Would you tell a military veteran who's been harmed, I'm sorry? No, you would have respect for the injury that's been caused by them. So when you say I'm sorry and you expect us to just like move over that speed bump, we can't. We have to do our own work to heal the impact of the trauma, but you have got to be the safest person on planet Earth for us to even consider.
What do you do with the anger? It's
So-
like when you want to punch him, you heard him saying?
I
And when you
know.
want to scream and say, why did you do this to us?
Yeah.
I'm
Well-
serious. Why did you do this to us? And how do you start processing this? Again, we're probably talking more about individual therapy and not couples yet, right? But we've got.
But anger's a part of it.
But we're looking at each other, and we've got to figure out how to talk to each other.
Right.
We've got work to do.
So let me tell you, when Jesus, he's our friend, but this is when he really, I love why he put himself in Scripture. So what did he do in the temple? What did he do when the temple was being defiled?
He was fired up.
He was fired up. He was mad. He was angry, and he
Flipped
gave
a
us
few
a
tables.
verse.
He sent a message too.
He did. He gave us a command, a double command: be angry, but don't sin in your anger. So the difference
That's tough to do.
between
Yeah, I got it.
we
Go
can
ahead.
be righteously angry, but rage, right, is not helpful, and it's hurtful. And I have partners who end up in that rage frame, and they end up in bitterness and hurt, and they don't even like who they are at that point. But I just want to say this. You know what the new research is showing us about the polyvagal theory? This is crazy. I just found this out. The polyvagal theory, you have to, in order to get out of post-traumatic stress symptoms, you have to either flee, fight, flight, freeze. You flee or you get angry. You've got to do both of them. We've been getting upset at betrayed partners. We've been pathologizing betrayed partners that have some anger because we're saying, almost like we have to have a gag order. And I'm not advocating for rage. What I'm advocating for is this hurt me deeply. And we need to talk about this. And if I don't get angry and I don't cry a river of tears, I cannot heal from the infidelity. And so that betraying person, he needs to put his pads on. They need to be able to hold our anger so that we can get past it. Because I don't want to stay
We got
in
work
my
to do.
anger.
We got work to do. I mean, that's part of it
I
here.
know.
And
I know.
we're fighting the time, but forgiveness becomes a big time issue here.
Right.
Forgiveness and grace. Somehow we've got to, as we press through this, Sherry, we've got to get to a place where we move back in together. And I'm not talking necessarily physically, but I am talking emotionally.
Right.
We've got to start embracing one another if we're going to go back into this place of trying to make it work.
So I agree. And so this is what I say. I am an advocate of forgiveness. I mean, it's also command, right? Because God wants us free, and forgiveness is so much about
because
ourselves. We've got to have it to restore.
I'm swallowing the poison. I'm swallowing the pain. I'm
Absolutely.
swallowing the hurt. I've got to let this stuff go. I've got to. But that doesn't mean that I have to sit here and allow you to keep cheating on me or treating me like dirt or anything like that. We're not talking about that.
No,
but
no,
we
because
are talking about we've
Yep.
got to let this thing, somehow we've got to get beyond this moment.
Yeah, and I get it. And if somebody is still acting out, it's not the time to forgive. It's the time to get safe, right? You need safety in the truth. The sobriety, which is the last time, when is the last day you acted out, is what is the focus is. But once you get a couple that's gone through that place where that person's become safe, and you've gotten the truth, right, through a full disclosure, and there's an impact letter that's written, there's an amends letter on the other side of it, which is starting to move that person towards the teshuvah. Now, I love ancient Hebrew, and there's a principle in ancient Hebrew that's called the teshuvah. And what the teshuvah means is turning around. It's a process of owning and atoning. And Judaism is filled with these amazing principles, and this is the steps of the teshuvah. And I see this when couples are willing to go through these steps, they actually heal and get to the other side. Let me just give you a handful of them. The first one is recognize what you did that was wrong. That means you're not minimizing, you're not blaming, you're not justifying, you're owning it. Reveal how you did that through confession, which includes a therapeutic full disclosure. Regret what you did wholeheartedly. I mean, you've got to have some guilt over what you did. We had a caller. I mean, we did an interview on Facebook before we came on today, and the story was the guy isn't feeling guilt. He says, I don't feel guilt over what I've done. And Brian asked me on Facebook Live, he said, what do I do with this person? I go, guilt is a part of healing. So however that person needs to connect with that guilt, they can't help your partner heal without some healthy guilt. Right? Remorse over what you did by making amends, resolve by making every effort to not do it again. That's sobriety, right? That's the work of recovery. Refrain from doing that the next time, because I've got a sponsor. I got a whole group of guys that I call before I actually go to the strip club. I'm not just driving there. I mean, I was interesting. I was working with a man who is compulsively acting out. And my husband and I were working with him. He's a pastor. Really, really like this guy. And he was continuing to go to strip clubs. And my husband said, so when did you think about calling somebody in your recovery group? And he said, I didn't. He said, well, did you have to call and make an appointment to go there? He goes, yeah, I did. He goes, you needed to make the call before. His phone worked. It's just that I got to call and make it to my recovery group. My guys are going to call me out, and then I got to repair the relationship and then restore. That means putting us back together again from what was stolen in that sacred trespass.
Bravery after betrayal. Some workshops you do to help couples on this journey. I love that title, by the way.
Thank you.
Sherry, here's what I know in closing. This isn't done. This is not easily done. It's a rough road. But I want to say this. Some of the strongest marriages I know today walked this road. And God gave them an amazing recovery and repair. You know that?
I do know it.
And they're mad in love. They're mad in love.
I know. I have at my Bravery After Betrayal, It Takes Fear of Strength retreat weekend. It's for partners. My team. I've got 2 women there who actually divorced their husbands. The guys got to work and they got remarried. And I've got some folks that are on the other side like myself. Their marriage was a casualty, but their life hasn't been. But when I see couples like you on the other side, there is such a hope in that, because these folks that go through it, it changes them. They grow deeper and stronger. The pain of the past doesn't consume them anymore. They now become powerful advocates for other people to help them, give them hope to get to the other side.
Yeah. Those who have been forgiven much, by the way, love much. I've learned that through the years.
It's
Sherry,
true.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you.